You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, as we do every Wednesday afternoon, we begin our dive into week number 8 of the NFL season, beginning with the Thursday Night Football matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Chargers. So as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you, your thoughts, your opinions on the matchup, who you like and why. What do you think is going to be the outcome? Maybe give me a score prediction in there. And as always, we're here for a good time. None of this is meant to be that serious. I like to talk ball. We're not doing betting advice, but if you are gambling, don't be afraid to comment below and share your thoughts with others. I got a ton of people that watch who know I don't gamble, but like to hear what I have to say. Feel free to join in on the fun, but let's all discuss. We've got ourselves Vikings and Chargers, and this is a pretty good matchup because both of these teams are coming off of tough losses in their own ways, and both of these teams need to get back in the W column. You look at the Los Angeles Chargers, who had their defense's doors blown off of them against the New England Patriots, Indianapolis Colts last week, and are sitting on 3 losses in their last 4 games. This is a team that a lot of people pinned for a potential playoff run, and injuries have put them in a really tough spot to this point in the season. So this is definitely a game that they need to get done and won and get back on track. Meanwhile, you look at the Minnesota Vikings. They're in a very similar situation. Lots of injuries. Things have derailed their season to this point here. They've been working with Carson Wentz the last handful of games, and he's been pretty good for the most part, but last week we saw a little bit of unraveling from him. So both teams in a spot where they need to get a W this week. I will say this, and this is where I'm going to start the conversation. The Chargers offensive line appears to be getting back on track and healthy at the right time in a situation where, again, they are losers of 3 of their last 4 games. You needed that O-line to get back healthy as quickly as possible. And Joe Alt has made it clear, speaking to media members, it sounds like the plan is for him to be a go tomorrow night against the Vikings. And on top of that, through reporting, it also sounds like offensive guard Trey Pipkins is also potentially slated to be back. So you're getting 2 key cogs to this offensive line back into the fold, which will be huge. Obviously, you're not getting Rashawn Slater back at any point this season, but getting Joe Alt and getting Pipkins back, 2 starters along that offensive line, is going to be huge because this Chargers pass protection has been a bit of a nightmare, and it culminated last week with one of the more absurd stat lines I've seen as far as pressures go for a single game, as during that entire contest, we saw Justin Herbert pressured on a whopping, I believe it was 35 total dropbacks, 35 pressures according to Next Gen Stats. And on top of that, as they currently stand, are league leaders in pressures allowed throughout the season so far with 136 total. They're also 5th in terms of time till pressure allowed at this point. So there is no better time than the present in this week to get 2 key guys back along that offensive line. You're also looking at 21 sacks allowed on the season, tied for 6th most in the NFL. And you've got a Minnesota Vikings defense that, even despite the fact that they've been missing key pieces like a Andrew Van Ginkel, are still very good at getting after the quarterback, making them uncomfortable, and also bringing them down. They're top 10 in both pressure rate and sack rate right now, which is actually 3rd best in the NFL in terms of sacks to dropbacks. So this is a good unit. The run defense, been about average this season as well, maybe not nearly as dominant as they were last season, but they're still a solid unit overall. So getting as much help back along that offensive line to help you in that pass protection and even help get you a little bit more push up front when it comes to running the football is going to be huge for this Chargers team against this Vikings defense and the style of defense that they play, especially for a team that loves to send the blitz and extra pressure to make QBs uncomfortable and force them into mistakes. The biggest thing, though, I think that I'm looking at for the Vikings side of things is going to be Carson Wentz, because like I alluded to a moment ago, he's been pretty good so far this season, I would say, while starting in place of J.J. McCarthy. But last week, we saw the kind of Carson Wentz experience sort of unravel, and you started to get a glimpse of what Carson Wentz is at this stage in his career. 2 interceptions, and they were bad interceptions on top of that. He completed about 61% of his passes, which is his season worst so far this year. He still managed 313 yards, but he had some back-breaking turnovers when you needed plays to be made. Now, according to Next Gen Stats, when I was doing some of the research on this, it sounds like this could be a favorable matchup for Carson Wentz, and it could bode well for Minnesota's offense. The Chargers run the 4th most zone coverage in the NFL so far this season, and the reason that's worth bringing up is because Carson Wentz has thrived against that zone coverage this season. He actually has the 2nd highest successful passing play rate in the NFL right now when throwing against zone coverage specifically, and he's also 2nd best in yards per attempt when passing against zone coverage at 9.5 yards per play. So his numbers definitely start to bottom out and crash when he's facing man coverage, and that is definitely something that I'm curious about, because if you're the Chargers and you're doing the research, especially on the defensive side, and you're scheming for this year, you're looking at that and you're realizing, we do a lot of zone. Do we have the guys to maybe try to run a little bit more man? And for Minnesota, their plan of attack and how they kind of decide to divvy this whole thing out and what they want to do, you got to remember, you're lining up across from Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison's now back in the fold. You got TJ Hawkinson going through the middle of the offense as well. There's a lot to worry about. So it's obviously a lot to ask a defense to just flip from what they're typically doing. And we're at this stage going into week 8 of the season. I don't expect the Vikings defense to completely flip the script. They like their exotic blitzes, the Chargers. They like to run a lot of zone coverage. They like to drop back and do what they do. So I don't expect a ton of changes in that department, but I would be interested in seeing if maybe they do try to run a little bit more man, knowing that Carson Wentz struggles with that. The other thing that I'm really interested in seeing, and this is kind of for both of these teams, because this is one of those things that is kind of where I feel like whoever dominates in this aspect might wind up coming out victorious in this one, because I don't think there's a clear-cut winner in this game. Like, yeah, it's a home game for the Chargers. The Vikings, of course, have to make the travel, but the Chargers, aside from travel and being at home and not having to go anywhere, they don't benefit from the home field advantage that most teams get, and that has been something that has been noted since moving to LA for them. But I really think when you look at the ground game for both of these teams and who establishes true control of the ball on the ground might be the team that comes away with a victory in this one. Neither offense is really known for their rushing attack, and actually both of these teams are bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of rushing attempts per game. Vikings are actually bottom 5, if I'm remembering correctly. Chargers are in bottom 10. So neither one of these teams are known for running the football a ton in comparison to everybody else in the NFL right now. And coincidentally, a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that both these teams are also dealing with injuries in their backfield. Aaron Jones has been banged up and he's been missing for a while for Minnesota. The Chargers have lost Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton at varying stages throughout this season so far. And as far as the production goes for both of these offenses, they're pretty neck and neck as far as total production goes. They're both about average as far as totals and production is concerned. Minnesota has an edge in rushing touchdowns scored at 5 to the Chargers 2, whereas the Chargers are averaging about somewhere in the ballpark of like 10 yards or so more per game, which is like negligible at best. So both of these rushing attacks, very similar in production that they've had, very similar in the hurdles that they've had to deal with this season, and ultimately having to rely more on their quarterbacks because of those hurdles. And the hurdles have been different reasons, but they've resulted in a very similar situation at the end of it all. I do think that when you look at this matchup, though, and when trying to decide who comes out victorious, for me, a lot of it came down to just offensive consistency and who I feel I could trust more in this game here. And I'm also not exactly the biggest believer in Carson Wentz. Like, I know things have looked really good for the most part. And again, last week, it kind of unraveled a bit. And that feels more along the lines of what Carson Wentz actually is at this stage in his career. It's just that Kevin O'Connell does an absolute masterful job of disguising the weaknesses of his quarterbacks and absolutely maximizing the talent that they have, putting them in the best situations to succeed offensively. But I do think that I have to lean more towards the side of Justin Herbert. Even if it hasn't necessarily been perfect this season for him, there's been a lot that's worked against him, especially along that offensive line. And it's very easy. I feel like a lot of people right now are pointing at Justin Herbert and going, what's going on? Interceptions are bad, blah, 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 blah. Like, and whatever, haters are going to hate. They're going to say what they have to say. But a lot of it has to do with just how behind the 8 ball they have been because of that offensive line in losing everyone the way they did literally from the jump of the season before it even really got going. So with that in mind, I think I am leaning on the side of the Chargers here. I think both of these defenses are semi-comparable between the two. I'd maybe give a slight edge to the Vikings a little bit more just because I really appreciate what Brian Flores does with the exotic blitzes and the way he's able to get after the quarterback. And yes, Joe Alt and Trey Pipkins are going to be back here. How rusty are they going to be, though? Are they going to be able to just jump back in and act like they never missed a game and never missed a beat? Or is it maybe going to be one of those games where they're there and it's definitely better that they are than not, but are they at the level that they need to be to really allow this offense to be successful? I don't know. That's probably the big question mark there. The Chargers are also getting some other guys back on the defensive side of the ball, which also makes me feel better about that side too. But I think this is a really tight contest. I don't think there is like a clear winner here. And Thursday night football games so far this season have been rife with just upset after upset after upset. It feels like the underdog keeps coming away with a win every single week, as recently as last week when the Bengals pulled off a wild upset against the Steelers. So this Thursday night football has been wild, and it's honestly been a nice change of pace because Thursday night games, I feel like the last few seasons were not great. This year, Thursday night football has been extremely interesting and worth staying up for to the very finish. But I do like the Chargers here, but I think they win a tight one, 23-20. It's going to be a grind, and to be completely upfront, if the Chargers end up blowing this game here and Minnesota comes with that upset victory, I would not even really be too surprised because, again, for the most part, Carson Wentz has been really good for this offense, despite the fact that Jordan Addison was missing for some time and you were only working with Justin Jefferson and you lost Aaron Jones. So he's been really good, but last week feels like maybe you got a little bit of that exposure of what he actually is. But again, the matchup, the way things seem to be shaking out, it feels like a good opportunity for Carson Wentz to bounce back, challenge this Chargers team, but I think the Chargers can get the job done. So I'll take LA 23-20, tight contest, exciting affair, and kick off week 8 with a bang. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. It's my thoughts on this Thursday night football game. We will preview the remainder of Sunday's games on Friday, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that. But until next time, have a good one.